And if I go to the bill of material, so the first thing is the flexi gear. So we have like all these components together. So the flexi gear, I have assigned an object dependency. So now let's go into this and click on this zigzag arrow, the dependency assignment. And now the maintain dependency screen appears where you can actually assign the dependency that you have created for the flexi gear. So my first component here is the flexi gear. So now for the configurator or the configuration screen to basically pick this component, what is the condition that we have assigned in the dependency? So that we are going to assign it here in the dependency maintenance. So the dependency I have assigned here is the f.gear, which is basically for the flexi gear. And what is the condition here? If I go into the editor, I can see that if the parent model is equal to fg, fg basically stands for the flexi gear and fg is again for the characteristic, right? And similarly, for the second item, which is a standard gear, we have defined or predefined in the system saying that there should be an option which basically should pick the second component or the standard gear if the selection is going into the dependency. Yeah, if the model is selected as SG, right? So what is basically done here is I have created independent dependencies and assigned them to each of these components. That is where the object dependency has been enabled here. So if there is no dependency enabled here, then it means that that component is not eligible to be part of the configuration screen, right? So that would by default come into the bill of material, irrespective of your model selected. In the same way, if I go to, let's say I did something tricky here. Let me show you. Yeah, so let's choose this last component, the plush cushion. So if I go into the dependency editor, yeah. So here I have inserted, three conditions. One is that the plush cushion component should be selected, or this particular component, only if the seat is selected as a road and the model is selected as a standard gear and the suspension is selected as mono. Only if these three conditions are met during the selection in the configuration screen, only then this particular component should be picked into the bill of material. That is how it has been designed. That's about the bill of material. Now I'm going to the routing. So again, I'm using the standard transaction CA02. So here I have, just to make it simple and easy to understand, I have just created two operations. So the first operation is for the assembly line for the flexi gear models, and the second one is for the standard gear models. So if the first operation should be picked into the production order, then again we should assign an dependency again to this operation. So the same way like we did in bill of material, if we go into the details of this operation, operation 10, and then object dependencies and click on assignments. So this is where we have the option to assign the dependency. So the dependencies what we have created, that depends on our requirement basically. Okay. So now I created an individual dependency for each of the components and also individual dependencies for each of these operations. Okay. So now this is a dependency for the operation. So there is no change in the transaction or no change in the method. Everything is same, like we just go to CU01, enter the dependency and write the syntax, and then do the assignment in the bill of material or the routing. So the dependency here is for the assembly line, and the code is if the parent model has been selected as FG, like the model that we selected as FG in the sales order during the configuration, that is where this particular operation should be picked into the production order. Okay, the assembly line for flexi gear models. And the same way, If I go to the next operation, maybe I can choose it from here, extras and yeah, assignments. Here I have assigned a different dependency for the standard gear. So the condition that we wrote here is if the model is equal to SG, only then the operation for the standard gear model should be selected. Okay. And we have also done the component assignment, which are our main components basically. So now for the flexi gear and the standard gear, if I go into the component list or the BOM, we do have these two different items, right? So one item is for the flexi gear and the second item is for the standard gear. So now I have assigned the first component, the first operation, which is for the flexi gear manufacturing line to this particular component. And similarly, the second operation for the standard gear assembly line is assigned to this second item of the bill of material. That is where, basically system will understand that if you pick this operation, you should also have a set of components to be picked along with it, right? That is where the configuration basically triggers. So that is it. I mean, apart from this, there are no other settings needed in the routing. And the next one is to go with the configuration profile. So that would be in CU41 to create it, but since I have created it, let me go to the change mode. Yeah, so here we are going to create the configuration profile for the material in CU41. So we are going to create it for the material or the KMAT product. So this is the configuration profile and the class assignment. Like you can see, we have already done this assignment in the material master and the same has been updated here. And now if I go into the details of it, so this is how it basically appears, and the config initial screen. So the config initial screen is basically, the pop-up screen that appears whenever you enter this material, the finished product, into the sales order. That is where it realizes that this material belongs to a VC process, and this is the pop-up screen that should appear now and in the particular format. Okay, and here we are going to assign let's say the application of the bomb explosion. So in the discrete manufacturing, we typically use a PP01 bomb explosion type, right? So that we are going to assign it over here. And again, the single level bomb or a multi-level bomb, that again depends on the number of levels you have under the bill of material. In this example, what we discussed so far, I just have one level of bill of material, right? We do not have any further sub-assemblies. So that is the reason I have selected it as a single level. So that is it. So once we assign the configuration profile, we are done. And yeah, just come back of it. And the next step is to create the sales order. So let me go to VS01. Let me make sure that I am not in any of these screens. Okay. Test, and then the material, the configurable material, and then the order quantity. Let's say we are manufacturing 2, and then the plant in which we are manufacturing, and the requirement date. Hit on enter. Okay, so yeah, this is our configuration screen, and these are the characteristics that we have assigned in the class, and this is the finished product. So now you could see the status before you assign any values. The status, it shows as incomplete with the yellow triangle. If the configuration is complete, then we would see a green light. But if there are any errors in the configuration, then it would show a red light. Okay. So now what options do we have here? The model of the bike. So here I'm expecting, let's say we'll assign the standard gear model, SG, right? And again the gear ratio. So these are these characteristics here are the ones that we have assigned in the class 300, right? So again, in the gear ratio, if I do a drop down, we could see these characteristic values. These are coming up since we have assigned these values to the characteristic gear ratio. So now the gear ratio I am trying to choose is a city gear ratio. Why? Because this is a standard gear or a standard cycle. So I don't want to go with a hybrid or sports. City, and then the suspension type. Okay, the suspension type, I would like to choose a mono suspension. And then the type of seat. So yeah, the values that we have here is mountain, touring and road. So since it is a standard one, I would like to go with the road type. So now the configuration is completed. You could see a green light. And then if you would like to see the complete structure of the BOM, you can just click on this icon on the result. And here you go. You have the components copied from the bill of material. You have the standard gear, and let me open that in a different screen. Yeah. So we selected the option, the model of the bike as the standard one. So then the component is the second component, RT002, right? And similarly, the city gear is a 6:2 ratio. Then the component is RT005. And similarly, the mono suspension and the plush cushion. So based on this, out of I think we have around 12 or we have 12 components. So out of these 12 components, we only got 4 components assigned, right? Because these are the selection parameters that we have defined in this particular class, right? And now if I go back, let me just show you if the configuration is not consistent. So how does the BOM appear? Okay, so let me go back to the configuration. Okay, or maybe I'll just complete this cycle and then we'll create a new order. So I'm going to save this. Okay, let me see what's incomplete here. Okay, the net value. Sorry. Okay, good. The document is complete. And now the sales order number is 19340. So I'll go to MD04. And here we could see the order 19340 with a quantity of 2 pieces, right? And now we are going to run MRP. And refresh. So there you go, we have a planned order. So now you might be thinking, why do we have these blanks over here, and why do we have this sales order appearing twice, and why is it colored in a different one? So the reason is basically, whenever we assign the strategy group as a 25, and sorry, I forgot to mention that in the material master, in the MRP3 view, which is the most important one, the strategy group you should assign here is 25. Yeah, so yeah, because of the make to order, we basically see this as a customer stock. So this is not exactly the sales order number, but whenever we do a goods receipt of the finished product, the stock will be placed into the customer stock, but not into the plant stock. So the stock that we see here on the top row, it's the plant stock, the total available stock at the plant level for the unrestricted use. But if it has been assigned here over the customer stock, it means that it belongs to this particular customer. Okay, so he is our customer here. So in make to order, this is how you basically see MD04. And the next thing is I'm going to convert this planned order into a production order. Yeah, so the production order, we could see the account assignment of the sales order since it is a make to order. And now if I go into the operations, you could see that we only got one operation. In the routing, we had two operations, right? One for the flexi and the other one for the standard model. But now we only got the second operation. Why? Because we have selected the model as a standard gear model, right? So we only got one operation. And similarly, if I go into the component list, I could see exactly the components that we have selected, not the entire list of those 12 items from the BOM. So we selected the model as a standard gear, and then the gear ratio as a city gear with 6:2 combination, and then we have the suspension type as a mono and the seat type as a plush cushion, right? So this is how it basically works. So now let's go back to the sales order and let's do a tricky part. Yeah, okay. Yeah, maybe I can assign from here. Enough the material. Let's put the order quantity, maybe, okay, let's do it too. And then the plant. Right, so now in the configuration screen, let's choose the standard gear again. Let me do flexi gear this time. And then the gear ratio, since it is a flexi, I mean, it means that it's a bit of the high-end model. So I'm going to choose the sports model. And then the suspension type, I'm going to choose mono suspension, and the type of seat is a road or maybe the plush cushion. Enter. And if I go into the result, I could see only two components, the first one and the second one. But what am I missing here? Let's understand that. So the first one is the flexi gear. So this is fine. We got the component RT001. And then why are we missing the we also could see the gear ratio, right? The sports gear as 10:4. Yeah, 10:4 is fine. And why are we missing these suspensions here? The suspension and also the seat. These two are not being copied, right? So what is the reason for that? Let's look at the dependencies that we have written in the bill of material. So the first one is to go into the mono suspension. Click on the dependency. Yeah. So here the condition is that the suspension will be as mono if the parent model is a standard gear, which means that this component is not eligible to be picked in the flexi model, right? That is fine. Now going to the second component, sorry, the flexible suspension. And now here, if the flexible suspension or the RT007 component to be picked, my condition is that your suspension model should be as a flexi and your model should be as an FG, right? So we fulfill the requirement of, we have met the condition of the model as FG, but the suspension that we selected here is a mono suspension, right? So that's the reason this component is also not picked. And again, to the third one, the hydraulic suspension. So for this, the condition is that the suspension again should be as a hydraulic and your model should be as SG. So again, this is rolled out. And finally, we have RT009. Let's look at this condition. So the condition here is the suspension type should be ADJ HYDR, which is basically for the adjustable hydraulic. And then the parent model should be a standard gear. So this is not our selection. So again, this component is ruled out. That's the reason, since we did not meet the conditions of these four components in the configuration screen, none of these components are basically selected into the bill of material. And the same way, if we look at the seat type, the heavy cushion, for example, If I go to the heavy cushion, the conditions written here are if the seat type is mountain and the parent model is FG, only then the component RT10 should be picked. But here the seat type I have selected is the road, right? So that's the reason the RT10 has been removed or not picked. In the same way, let me check for the RT11 medium cushion. They should be selected only if the seat type is selected as touring and the model is a standard one. So ruled out again. And finally, we have the plush one. The condition here is if the seat is road, which meets our selection in the configuration screen, and the model is SG, but we selected it as an flexi gear, so ruled out. And also the suspension is mono. So the first one and the last one, it basically met our combination, but the model should be as FG, right? I mean, we selected it as FG, but the condition should be as SG, the standard gear. Only then this particular component will be selected. So that's the reason the last material is also not selected. If I go back to the configuration screen, going into the characteristics, sorry. Let's do one thing. Let's change the seat type as, or maybe choose the suspension type as a flexi suspension. And now the seat type as mountain or a heavy cushion. Now let's look at the BOM. Now we could see all the 4 components being picked into the bill of material. We have the flexi gear, we have the sports gear, we have the flexible suspension, and also the heavy cushion. Why? Because all the conditions that we defined in the bill of material are met. So now this is a flexi gear. I'm going to save it. So our expectation in the production order is to see an operation that has a flexi gear in it. Okay. Okay, now I'm going to save this. So the order number is 19341. Going back to MD04 and refresh. So we have the sales order 19341, but with a different set of characteristics. So the previous one 19340 sales order, this is for the standard one, the standard gear model, and this is for the flexi gear model. So now I'm going to run MRP again. Refresh. So we see a new planned order. Convert it into a production order. And if I go into the operation, yeah, there you go. So we have the operation selected for the flexi gear model, and the set of components should be related to the flexi gear. That is what we configured in our configuration screen. So that is how, guys, basically the variant configuration works, and we have discussed on the setup, and we have discussed on the maintenance of the dependencies. And please be cautious while you write the code in the dependency editor. That should follow those particular symbols that starts with a dollar, and also you have to mention it as a parent, and then put a dot, and then go with the characteristic, assigning a value to it. So apart from this, we do not have any separate kind of a configuration from the SPRO. So all we have to do is basically go with the master data creation and maintenance of it.